90% of individuals would be gone. Now, if you've noticed, we've had these electromagnetic shocks. We've had these solar array issues. We've had the northern lights in the south. There's a lot that's been going on. Very bizarre, disturbing kind of habits. It looks cool in the sky, but what does all this mean? Well, there's a new scientist saying, well, the sun is actually getting hotter, and it could cause problems. And it's not about destruction of the world. What it is, though, he said, it could destroy our grid. And with grid being destroyed, 90% of individuals, several studies show, without the grid, 90% of individuals would either cease of living or suffer innumerably. We're going to talk about that today. Discuss the dangers of that. Also, we're going to talk about our food. Again, the dangers of the monopolization of our food and how we're allowing it to happen. Both sides are allowing it to happen, and how you can take your food back. We're going to discuss that today. And then we're also going to talk about what Elon Musk just said about robots. The biggest fears that we've talked about with AI robots could be coming true. We're going to talk about how many robots that we're supposed to have by the next 4 to 5 years, and then compare that to soldiers. It will blow your mind. And then we're also going to talk about how should we open the draft again? Well, we're not saying that, but several other places across the world is starting to open the draft because they're thinking something is big happening. Now, the thing is, the immigrants are not having to go and sign up for conscription. Only the citizens of those countries. Isn't that weird? We're going to discuss that. And then we're also going to talk about Christianity. The war on Christianity. Tucker Carlson goes after Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer was one of the most biggest spokesmen during World War II against German, takeover and annihilation of all the people they did. I mean, from every group of individuals. And now Tucker Carlson is coming out against him. That leads me to one story. You'll never believe who's the biggest influencer in America. We hear about, Israel. No. Wait till you see who is actually influencing the most in America. Who actually has the biggest footprint here? Israel's way down the list. But we'll talk about that list today. Let's dive into these stories because, boy, we have been confused in this nation. And I think this will be some eye-opening information. Let's dive in. Hey guys, welcome to our channel. Thank you so very much for being here today. If you are new, please go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, that's okay, but let us know what you think about the content of today's video. Now remember, we do have another channel, Life with Colby Mack. We've been posting on there just about once or twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. We'll have a video going out tomorrow on the weekend, so please make sure you're checking that channel out. You'll see a lot of how we live sustainable and how we enjoy life together as a family. We want to make sure people honor families again. And so that's why that channel is there. So make sure you check that out. Now, let's jump into the stories of the day because that's why you're here. First, let's talk about this situation with the electromagnetic pulses and shocks. Now, we worry about the cyber attacks. We worry about the dangers of other nations like North Korea, China, and all these people having access to our grid. We worry about our grid being vulnerable. I mean, there was a report that said that Claude AI was being used by the Chinese to infiltrate our grid, infiltrate our military secrets, infiltrate certain parts of businesses. So automatically you worry about those things because of the dangers of it. Now, what is something that you cannot really help? Well, to be honest with you, it's the sun. The sun is what gives life to us. I mean, of course, Jesus and God gives life. As Christians and spiritually, we believe that. But He gives us the sun to radiate on us to make sure that we have oxygen, photosynthesis, carbon dioxide. It warms the earth, cools the earth. The earth is just where it needs to be in the solar system to be safe. Isn't it amazing how God makes that? Now, let's talk about what's happening. If you've noticed some bizarre and disturbing things, you're starting to having northern lights in Mississippi and Texas and, all across America. Things that you would have to fly to Alaska to see and northern Canada to see and Greenland and all these places. Now you're seeing them all across different regions. And the crazy thing is, this is not just a phenomenon like once in a lifetime. We've had this happen, 2 or 3 or 4 times over the last few years. Well, there's a scientist that came out and said, some of these situations with the sun is actually because it's getting hotter. It's having problems. It's kind of seismically getting bigger and getting to where it's throwing out some unique signs. Now, as a Christian, I believe this is definitely signs that show that, the earth and the world that we know, it could be coming to its final stages. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. That doesn't mean it's going to happen next year. It could, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen 10 years from now. We don't know. But what I do see is you're starting to see the signs that we've been warned of. We talked about the issues with, all the Middle East fights. You talk about the wars. You talk about the dangers of sin. You talk about all that. But also start looking at this aspect too. Now, this scientist came out and stated that, if we are not careful, if we're not careful, what we don't realize is our grid is so fragile and it's actually in a very bad spot because we've not invested in it. And it says even though there's a lot of countries that's invested in the grid, America is not one of them. He came out and said that within a 6-month period, if our grid goes down based on the sun cooking it, there's no fixing it at a quick pace. And within 6 months, 90% of humans would either be gone or suffering to a point of no return. Now, we've done a video on this years ago about prepping and making sure you are ready for this. If you know anything about our family and you've watched this for a long time, we have a place underground that we actually consider like a Faraday cage or a bunker. We keep a lot of solar generators down there. We keep a lot of stock down there. We also keep a lot of alternative energy sources in different inconspicuous places around our property and also on other people's property. Why do we do that? Because we see the dangers of what we will go through in America. I believe America and the earth in whole, we've been so, especially America, has had things so easy. So when we hear these things, we just act like, it's just some stupid scientist. Global, warming and all that. I understand. I don't believe in all the stuff that a lot of these scientists say. But I do believe that we should prepare and make sure that we understand some of the dangers and the vulnerabilities of our grid. If you remember the winter storms, if you remember the hurricanes, if you remember the crazy storms, did you remember that a lot of that stuff was phenomena back then? If you go back into the early 1900s and you would hear about these major storms in history and they wasn't happening every year. We were not seeing earthquakes like this every year. We were not seeing hurricanes like this every season. We were not seeing winter storms like this every year. They were once in a generation kind of thing. Well, the more that this kind of phenomena or weather modification happens or whatever it may be, sun heats up, whatever it is, it's going to cause more vulnerabilities for our grid. So a few things right quick before we go into these other stories. Make sure that you have some alternative energy sources. Make sure you have some food put up for safety that does not need the grid. Make sure you're protecting your home. We've talked about the things like the door cave. We've talked about window screens. We've talked about protection elements for your home. Have you got extra locks and chains on your doors? Remember, people are crazy. And if times get tough, the point of saying 90% of people won't make it is not because just the sun will cause the problem, the grid will be bad. It's because people are reliant on other people to provide for them. If people are not providing for them, guess what happens? Looting, massive civil unrest happens. Government's martial law takes place. All these things are already put intact to where if something were to go wrong like that, government steps in and or people start losing their minds. If people can't get the vices like medicines, alcohols, if people can't get the procedures they're needing, think of the dangers and ramifications of the grid collapse. Now, Trump has promised that he is going to add to the grid and fix the grid. I think that we need to start looking at that aspect very, very closely, not for the data centers, but for the fact of energy usages for Americans. The more we see the sun damaging certain parts of our grid, the more we should be investing in other forms of energy. Renewable energy or more gas and oil production or more refineries or more reactors or all the above. This is a serious issue. And have you noticed all these people are posting pictures of these, these big eclipses and, all this, the skies look beautiful because of the northern lights. I think we need to pay attention that this is not normal. And these phenomenons and these hurricanes and these natural disasters that we call natural, no matter if you believe they're natural or not, they could cause some major problems for Americans. Pay attention to this story. I think a lot of people are not paying attention to it. A lot of people kind of just scan over it because they tie it to like global warming or climate change. I'm not tying it to that. I'm tying it to the fact that our Earth is telling us something, and our grid is vulnerable in America, and you better make sure that you're ready. You better be prepared, because I don't think times are going to get a lot easier for us. Yes, political, yes, spiritual, but also physical. Now, I know that probably doesn't interest a lot of people, but I do think as a prepper, as someone who really tries to be independent, preparing for the grid is a big deal, and preparing for safety is a big deal. Now, before we go any further, a word from today's sponsor. Again, this is one of those cases where we just talked about with Claude AI, the dangers of some of these AI cyber attacks, all this problem that's going on. We're first going to get in talking about Elon Musk with robotics. A word from today's sponsor, something you should invest in. I wanted to try it just to say, is when, our phone's listening to us, the information that we put on there, how dangerous is it for us? Are we actually compromised? So I said, I'm going to go to Google, and I'm just going to Google one of my sister's names. So I typed in her name. All of a sudden, I started realizing my oldest sister's old address from 4 years ago was on there. Our home phone number was listed on there from when I was a kid. Not only that, it gave emails. It gave all this information. So I called her and I said, do you realize I can get all this information, probably take out a few credit cards, open new accounts? It blew her mind. I want you to try this too. I want you to go and just Google one of your family members' names. Not to be a creeper or anything, but I want you to just test my theory. Go out there and just Google. It will blow your mind at what you can find out about your family members. The sad thing about when you search, a lot of this information, a lot of these websites, a lot of the places that you go are ran by data brokers. They're getting your information, and guess what? They're sharing it with people who are not the most reputable. Maybe even on the dark web. From scammers to spammers, none of these people are actually looking out for your well-being and your information. Now, here's the thing. They're not legally able to have your information if you tell them to take your information off. But I'll be honest with you. If you start looking online, you realize how many people have your information. It's almost impossible for you to go to all these companies and say, please, take my information off your sites. See, that's the benefit of my sponsor today, Aura. Aura comes alongside you. They work to do just that, to take your information away from being vulnerable, away from being compromised, from the people that want to scam you and spam you all the time. Aura identifies all the data brokers that are getting your information, and they give an opt-out clause, meaning they cannot legally have your information anymore. It's kind of like having a house and having doors and having locks and never locking the door. Aura allows you to lock the door. Give Aura just a few weeks. I promise you what you're going to see is your information is going to start being yours again. You're going to realize the spammers and scammers are going to stop. Aura also continuously monitors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're going to make sure they let you know if it is. Also, they have a world-class VPN to keep you safe as you search the internet. Do not miss out on this opportunity to utilize Aura to benefit you and your family's safety online. Remember, let's lock the door. You can go to my link below, aura.com/themacs. It's in the description. When you click on that, you're getting a 14-day free trial. In that 14 days, you're going to realize all the benefits of what they're doing. They're going to opt your information out from being vulnerable and compromised. Check out Aura today, aura.com/themacs. Do not miss out on this opportunity to have this free trial along with your safety. Now let's go to what Elon Musk just said. Elon Musk said by 2030, our goal is to make sure that we have, listen, 1 million robots made. 1 million robots produced and working in America. Now, a few things. These robots, can they help? I mean, they could. But remember, AI and robotics are made by humans. Humans have a problem of wanting too much power. Have you noticed that? That's why we don't have term limits. That's why we have people always wanting power, always wanting to take advantage of other people. That's why socialism, communism is growing, because people want power. If robotics and AI is made by people, and Elon Musk has even said that he wants to make sure he stays over the Tesla version of it because he's scared that it could go into the wrong hands and cause a problem, that should make us be very wary. Now, not just because of jobs, losses of jobs in manufacturing. That's a big deal, and I believe that's going to cause a major problem. But not only that, guess what else? All right, we said 1 million robots. Do you know America right now? Now it's actually, we're doing pretty good because of Trump, and Pete Hegseth. But do you know active military right now, based on numbers, it shows that we have about 1.3 million active duty military. Now we have some National Guards and some retirees that would come back. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about straight active duty. It's about 1.3. Now that's worldwide. That's American-wide. Now, if you think about it, if we can make 1 million robots, how dangerous could that be if someone uses those robots for the wrong reason? Now, we just talked about AI hacking. We talked about the safety of all this stuff that's going on. But there is another report that China is infiltrating our capabilities more and more using AI and cyber attacks. How dangerous would it be if all of a sudden these things get hacked? Has anyone seen iRobot and Terminator? I mean, come on, people. And I know we are like, oh, that's just movies. Yeah, but if we're making 1 million robots by 2030, is what they're saying. And that's just the main company of Tesla. So you say ChatGPT and Sam Altman, Microsoft, NVIDIA, whomever. I mean, you can name 14 other different companies that are Fortune 500 companies that are multi-billion or multi-trillion dollar companies. And you're telling me that if one company's making $1 million, another company makes $200,000, another company makes $400,000, another company makes $800,000, we're in a war with humanity. Is humanity going to be able to step up to the fact of what robotics has done? So if robotics is in the play and Americans struggle trusting their own leaders because they want too much power, they're taking advantage of us, what's to say these robots are actually a good thing? Now, we've talked about this for a long time. I know they can be used for good. Please understand that. I'm not saying that everybody is evil, but I am saying this. If our whole economy right now is focused on technology, on AI, on robotics, I think it's like we're literally trying to cut our foot off to save our hand. I think it's like we're honestly saying, okay, we're not struggling enough. Let's make ourselves struggle more because we're actually putting the final nail in the coffin. We're already struggling with jobs. We're already struggling with debts. We're already struggling with too many people here. What are we going to do when AI robots come around and start taking our jobs too? It's going to make us fully dependent on the government. Well, the government can't take care of anything. There's a new report that said that even during the shutdown, they borrowed $600,000. There's a new report that says even during the shutdown, $600 billion were borrowed and taken from debts that they needed to pay bills. Now, you do realize that they're taking property tax from you, they're taking all these other taxes from you, and they still have to borrow more money. They still have to borrow more money. So nothing that the government does has actually helped. And all of a sudden now they're going to help subsidize AI and robotics. This is not a good thing. I know Elon Musk and I know all these AI people are like, oh, this is a great innovation. It's going to help Americans thrive. I don't see it that way. I'm still struggling to figure out why we think AI robots is the way of the future and why we don't just say, let's just get people back to work and understand the value of hard work again. We've done that for, millennia. I mean, we've done that forever. Why do we think now, in this time in history, that Americans and people of the world does not have to work and we're going to allow robots to do it for us? There's something in the Bible that says if you don't work, you don't eat. There's also talking about the fact of our founders talking about the value of hard work. We talk even Kennedy saying, what can we do for our country? And now all we want to do is just sit on our lazy tails and let robots do it for us. This is not the answer. And this new report, over the next few years, I think you're going to see more and more AI and robotics being used in your life, like the digital ID yesterday, that could come back and absolutely put us in a prison and put us as animals have been taken care of. Well, animals are taken care of, but they have a purpose. They're being sheep led to slaughter, if you get what I'm saying. So are we actually just putting ourselves in our own prisons by honestly building all this robotics and AI? I think so. You know what? If you start thinking, the only way to shut down a virus, the only way to shut down cyber attacks, the only true way to shut down all the problems that technology would cause us with robotics would be a grid collapse. Isn't it funny how we're talking about that at the same time we're talking about AI robotics? So it's kind of like, well, if this all fails, then we'll just blow the grid up. Well, if the grid blows up, then most of humanity dies. It's weird how all this stuff is just playing hand in hand, and this is supposed to be the new innovation of America. This is supposed to be where we're, valuing more and more money. I just don't think this is the right move. Now, that kind of leads me to two other stories that are very important. Germany just came out and are starting to make sure that all young men are signing up for conscription. They have to serve in the military. You're starting to see this all across Europe. And the purpose is they believe they're planning for war with Russia. They believe in a true World War III setup. So you're starting to see this serving of having to serve in the military. Now, here's the thing that's kind of unique to me. During this push for conscription, there's never a mention of all the migrants that's coming over. So the 10 million people that Germany has taken in that's got to be taken care of by the German people, the German citizens are having to sign up for conscription, but the quote-unquote asylum migrants do not. Basically, we're sending our own populations to die for people who came over to our countries and actually just don't assimilate and are not part of the culture, and then on top of that, we're not making them legally serve. Makes no sense to me. I thought that was a very unique thing. Also, did you hear the fact that during these conscription services that they have to prepare like they're going to war? It's not just like, oh, we're going to make you like police and we're going to let you serve your 2-year term and then you can go back to your family. They're basically telling you, you will go to war. Now, what is setting up in our nation? What is setting up across the world? Why can't we truly have peace? This is why I don't think Trump will ever see true peace with Russia, Ukraine, and or any of the Middle East. I think it's spiritual, of course, but also I think that our own NATO allies are fighting against that. I don't know if they actually want peace. You know what someone from Europe said the other day? He said, see, what people don't realize is Europe is broke. Even worse than America, even worse than Japan. Europe is broke. And the only way that Europe will ever get back on top and actually not fall to a point where their euro falls, all their currencies fall to where they can become completely bankrupt because they've importing so many people, because they're not having children anymore, because they've not learned their lessons. He said it's war. He said they have to have war. Without war, they go broke. So while Trump is wanting peace, NATO is wanting war. Europe is wanting war because without it, they cease to exist. Now I want to go to 2 more stories and we'll kind of end up. This story about beef and the dangers of our food system being monopolized. This was shared just yesterday, and we've talked about this several times about the problems with our food system. It says America's beef is completely rigged along with the other forms of food. Listen to this. It says 4 corporations, JBS, Tyson, Cargill, and National Beef, control nearly 85% of this industry. Now, Tyson, Cargill, and there's 2 other big players in chickens do the same thing. The result is simple. Ranchers are being squeezed out of the market while consumers face record prices of beef and chicken and pork. It says, yes, President Trump has directed help and has directed people, and there's been several states. I think New Hampshire, even though it's not the most conservative state, came out and said that they're going to allow for people to buy meat directly from the farmer instead of worrying to go to some kind of butcher or some kind of grocery store. That's great. Here's the problem though. Because we've allowed for this monopolization, for instance, in my area, there's a lot of farmers like me that has 20, 30, 40, 50 head. But these farmers depend on selling them, not me, but these farmers depend on selling those cattle to jobbers that end up selling to these 4 big money-making, beef providers. So even though we want to fix the system, because cattle ranchers, chicken farmers, especially chicken farmers, are monopolized, and a lot of the other industries when it comes to food and meat and even milk, it's owned by the biggest players. Now, this is the same government that says they want to help you. They've allowed for this monopolization to happen. Did you know, like in beef, that most of these companies are not in America? Did you know that? 2 of them are definitely not in America, and the other 2 are companies that have been bought and shares all over the world. So are we actually seeing American beef and American farmers being benefited by these companies? Really, no, because these companies could care less to truly benefit America. They just see money. So why have we allowed our government, again, to have such a foothold in parts of our life if they actually are not looking out for our best interest? This kind of goes back to the grid issue. This kind of goes back to the AI robotics. It goes back to the fact that when we put our faith and hope in politicians and in leaders, all they do is worry about their own monies and their own coffers. They only worry about themselves, because what these big companies have done is they've paid heavy lobbies to then pay for these people to vote in order to honestly destroy our food system. They said the cost of beef, the problem is not the farm. The problem is not the cow. The problem is actually not inflation. The problem is these big four providers can set the price and everyone's got to go with it because ultimately they are the ones buying and selling. Without them, you have no market. So this is where we've got to start deregulating the food industry. This is where we've got to go in and say, well, if mom and pop owns a milk farm or owns a dairy farm or has some chickens, that the government should not be able to step in to say you can or cannot sell. You know, we go back to the Amos Miller story with, I think in Pennsylvania, the Amish who was selling raw milk. One person said they got sick off his milk. They shut the whole operation down and went and confiscated all his food. You know, in Mississippi, a very conservative state, I cannot sell my raw milk. I cannot sell my beef off farm, my pork off farm, unless it walks onto a trailer. I can't just, you know, like for instance, I got bacon sitting in this chiller right now that I'm aging out. Hams, I just cut up pork chops. I could not actually sell to my neighbor legally in Mississippi and give them that beef at a good price, a better price than the store, because it's illegal. But the government tells me I can't because you can't trust my food, but then you can trust the people making ground beef and they're making it for profit, not for the goodness of Americans. See, that's a broken system. So if we allow for our chicken to be sold by 4 major providers, our pork sold by 3 to 4 major providers, and the biggest pork provider, Smithfield, is a Chinese company, by the way. And then the 4 biggest providers of beef, 2 of them Brazilian Chinese, not even tied to America. Don't you see that that could be a problem? So the problem, you know, it's not the 4 companies. That is the problem. But you know who made that problem? Our government. Our government made that problem by allowing these people to get so big and allowing for regulation to hit the farm so much that I can't even sell my own milk to my own neighbor, my own pork to my own neighbor, my own food to my own neighbor without some kind of special permitting, special law. They overregulate you and then tell you what you can do. That's not freedom. And the reason I want to bring it up is because the more government is in our life, I feel like a broken record. The more the government's in our life, the less control of your life you actually have. The more control they have. So why do you think they push all these things? Why do you think our health insurance is going up crazy? Why do you think our debts are going up crazy? Because the more that you need them, the less you have freedom. The more control they have. The last story I want to bring up, because this kind of plays into, again, the war that we're facing, and it's the war with Christianity. Tucker Carlson has said some crazy stuff lately, and Candace Owens too, and all these woke right individuals. But I think that the biggest one was this week when he came out against Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a preacher and a Lutheran preacher in Germany. Died for his faith. Tucker shared a lot of things that were not completely true. I think Eric Metaxas did it best. He wrote a book, but then also a movie on Bonhoeffer. Go check it out. But you know, if we start seeing influencers trying to impact you more and more for things that are against what we consider values and conservatism, we need to call them out. Do I care that Tucker Carlson is speaking to Fuentes? Do I care that Candace is spewing all this garbage? I don't. But to say that they're conservative doing it and to say they're Trump supporters doing it, I think that's the problem. They need to quit lying about who they are. And I just honestly believe you're starting to see their true colors. Now, why do I want to bring that up? Why is this a big deal? Tucker has a Middle Eastern partner. He's had a Middle Eastern partner for a long time. He has a lot of ties to Qatar. He has a lot of ties to sympathizing for these countries because of some of the funding that he's got. You can do your own research there. You don't have to take my word for it. Go see his partner is and read about him a little bit. Okay? Now, I want to go to a new report that just came out. You know, all you hear, and you know this, all you hear is that Israel has such an impact in our life, that they're the ones leading the White House, they're the ones leading these influencers, they're in control. And that's such a lazy argument, such a stupid argument, makes no sense. And now finally, there's a report that kind of represents exactly that. This is from Wall Street Mad that shared this. It says, this is absolutely crazy how other countries are paying and trying to get influence into America. Came out that said that Qatar and China are the biggest influences in our colleges right now. Do you think Qatar and China has our best interest at heart for our colleges? I don't think so. Now let's talk about influencing. The Tucker Carlson's. The biggest impact of influencers. Who is paying a lot of these influencers? Where this money is coming from for the Twitter influencers, the Facebook influencers, the YouTube influencers. And I'm just going to be honest. I'm not paid by any country. I get no money from any country. But I want to read this to you. Listen to this. The 11 countries paying the biggest amount of money to U.S. TikTokers and other influencers. Number 1. It's not Israel. It's Qatar. $2.8 million to 22 creators to make 180 reels. Saudi Arabia is number 2. $4.1 million to 31 creators, 300 stories. UAE, $1.9 million to 18 creators for 120 reels. Turkey, $1.2 to 15 creators for 90 posts. Now, the top 4 are Middle Eastern Muslim countries. Is Israel the one influencing America, or is Muslims? Number 5, China, $3.4 million to 25 creators, 200 TikToks. Russia, $9.7 to 6 YouTubers. They were indicted, by the way, because of those ties. Number 7, Korea, 2.3, 20 creators, 150 posts. Japan, 5.6, 35 creators, 400 posts. Mexico, 1.1 to 12 creators, 100 reel. Egypt, 900,000, 10 creators, 80. That was the top 10. Israel was 11. And was 900,000, wasn't even a million like all the rest in the millions. And it was to 14, 18 creators to make 75 posts. Now, no country should have influence. I mean, including Israel. No country should. People should be able to speak their mind. That's the whole point of personal opinion and conversations. And true conservatives, true traditionalists, true libertarians, true liberals would say that, because ultimately my opinion is mine and I'm just trying to influence you to do your own research. But then let's think about your biggest political commentators. Wouldn't you like to know who they're affiliated with? Again, do your research on Tucker. It's amazing how he's speaking against Israel, how he's speaking against really America and Trump, and speaking for some of these countries that somehow have ties to him. Some of these biggest woke right individuals, if you go back and look, a lot of them has had a lot of relations with people like Qatar. And a lot of people in the Middle East that's not Israel. You can say it allegedly, just go back and do your own research. That's all I'm saying. The sad thing is, we're being impacted by other countries. You're not being impacted by personal opinion. You're being impacted by other countries. And that is destroying the conservative arm, the Christian arm, the traditional arm of America. Please pay attention to these stories. Pay attention to who you trust in, because you need to do a little research on them. Because I think you're going to realize a lot of these people may be leading you wrong because of who is paying them. It's kind of like politicians, lobbyists. I believe that everybody should have a patch of who's paying them. I think influencers should have the same thing. They should be on the screen every time someone is doing not only advertising, but just speaking. There should be, okay, well, this person paid me $1 million, $2 million, $4 million, $10 million, whatever it may be. So that way we kind of know their biases, huh? Guys, give me your thoughts on today's video. I just want you to be aware of what's going on. And I hope this video helped. God bless.